Here's my final thought. If you're still thinking the coronavirus is an epidemic overseas in Asia and parts of Europe, and not likely to cause major problems here in the U.S., you may want to take heed. This might be bad, and that's from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. It's not so much a question of if this will happen in this country anymore, but a question of when this will happen. And there's more. Schools should consider plans to divide students into smaller groups or use internet-based teleschooling, and that's from the CDC. For adults, businesses can now replace in-person meetings with video or telephone conferences while increasing teleworking options. The CDC yesterday said there are now 53 confirmed cases of the coronavirus here in the U.S. That includes people evacuated from the cruise ship in Japan and the Chinese city of Wuhan. President Trump says coronavirus is very much under control in this country, but the markets are saying anything but. They're down again today. Mr. Trump is proposing $2.5 billion in emergency funding to cope with coronavirus. Some Democrats and Republicans already predicting that just won't be enough. Here's my concern, folks. How do we know? The scientists, medical community, the president and Congress need to get on the very same page. We need one message. How concerned should we be, and where do we go for the truth about coronavirus? That's my final thoughts. Reach out with your comments. Thanks for joining us tonight on the Q&A, and we're going to see you back here tomorrow.